Oh, okay. Hey, guys, and welcome to our second D&D as ministry session. Our goal today is to give you a little bit of a depiction about how each of us have used role-playing games in a way to connect with people and also have gospel-centered conversations with people. Giles has actually built out a lot of stuff that you can have as resources that you can just go get. He'll tell you about. I don't because I didn't do it. And so I am really sorry about that. But I'm more than willing to be accessible to you post of this if you have like an idea you want to follow up on or you need any of the resources from our church. And so our real goal is to give you a little bit of idea about what we're doing. And then the vast majority of the time is just going to give you guys a chance to ask questions. I said this with the last group. I suspect it'll be less of a problem with this group because the people who are really gung-ho about D&D came here first. People who are curious about it are here now. So the point of the questions is to help around how do you structure and use tabletop RPGs as a form of relationship building for the purpose of ministry and gospel conversations. The goal is not, if I tell you a 40-minute detailed version of my character's backstory, can you tell me how I can make that about Jesus? And so I have run in D&D long enough to know that when you walk into a room with another Dungeons & Dragons player, you are likely to receive a far too thorough description of the world that they created or the character that they're playing, and I don't care about that. Not that you shouldn't care about that. I'm glad that you love your character, but I promise not to tell you pointless things about my character if you promise not to tell me pointless things about your character, okay? Can we just enter that social contract, please? And so our goal is just to be able to gear that towards it just being constructive and helpful for building out something that moves from just, hey, you and your buddies around the table playing D&D and chucking dice and having a beer, and moves more towards like, hey, how can we actually implement and use the most powerful pieces of TTRPGs as a tool for ministry inside of our churches or inside of our digital contexts. And so that's what we're going to focus on. Giles and I are going to start off by sharing a little bit about who we are, a little bit about ourselves, a little bit of our background into role-playing games.
Yeah. So I'm Giles Hash. I've been playing role-playing games for about 18 years. Two of my best friends in the world, I built closer relationships with them through role-playing games. And that inspired, as I was looking at pursuing potential opportunities for full-time ministry, what's the name of my organization again? Disciple Gaming Ministry. I've only had that name for a couple of years. So the relationships built at the table have opened up amazing opportunities to minister to a couple of atheists who are also my closest friends, and inspired me to go out into the local gaming community and start building relationships with other people, to open the doors to share the gospel with them, and hopefully reconnect them with a church who abandoned or burned bridges with them during the satanic panic of the 80s, telling them Dungeons and Dragons is evil, you're going to summon demons, and you're a bad person for doing that. I want to heal that wound, and I want to share the love of Jesus at the place where they exist. The other side of Disciple Gaming Ministry is using role-playing games as a Bible study aid. So playing games and integrating biblical doctrine at the table, so that way we're learning it and applying it, and it sinks in our mind a lot more effectively that way. My wife, who's an education major, can go into all of the reasons why scientifically that's true, but that's the goal of Disciple Gaming Ministry, and it came from building relationships with friends around the table, 20 years of now a lifelong friendship. People who have called me in some of the lowest, darkest times of their lives, some of the most celebratory times of their lives, where we are not bonded through God, although some of my closest friends are Christians as well. Our biggest bond is D&D, and will hopefully someday be also and prioritize Christ himself.
Talk just a minute about the... you created the system that you created for churches. Talk about that just for a moment.
Yeah. So initially, when I had this idea of using games as a Bible study aid, I was looking at a group in Oregon called Game to Grow that uses role-playing games for social anxiety, to help people with social anxiety take risks at the table that would not have real-world consequences. And I thought, if they can learn and apply psychological techniques at the table, why can't we do that with a Bible study program? I didn't want to use Dungeons & Dragons because of the stigma with a lot of churches, and initially thought, hey, I'll use another system. It's called Fate. Basically, you roll 4 6-sided dice with pluses, minuses, and blanks, and then add stats from there. But they are produced by a company called Evil Hat. If a church, especially a more conservative church, looks up a company called Evil Hat, they might have a problem with that. And then their #1 promoted product on their website for the last 5 years is a product called Thirsty Sword Lesbians. So role-playing games with lesbian eroticism built in. I'm like, that's so many things to overcome on top of the stigma of role-playing games. I created something brand new. It uses, it's a 1d6 system, which means it uses one 6-sided die. Everybody has a 6-sided die in their Monopoly set. If you don't own Monopoly, that means that you're younger than 15.
But also, praise the Lord for not owning Monopoly,
right.
because it's terrible.
But almost everybody owns a board game that has at least one 6-sided die. So you can get that one 6-sided die sitting in the middle of the table. You have a character sheet in front of you, and then the second half of the book is teaching the game master how to run the players through the system, so that way they know the rules as well, and then also teaches them proper hermeneutics, which is the process of studying scriptural context, both historical and literary, as well as some tools to study the language, so you can pick out keywords in the language, and then apply that with sound doctrine, exegetical doctrine, and turn your Bible, or turn your game session into a proper Bible study.
One of the things that I love is one of the one-shots that he does, that Giles does, is it takes place as your characters are, you create a character that's one of the Christians taking resources to Jerusalem, but you're leaving Ephesus during the riot in Ephesus in the book of Acts. And so you're playing non-named, you're not being Paul, you're playing non-named, non-biblically named Christians who are stuck in Ephesus as the riot breaks out, and Paul is being, drugged out to, I don't even know where he gets struck to. You know more than I do. But he built this one shot around, then you get to experience from a little bit further back the biblical narrative and the story, and you get to role play through that and have an adventure through that, which is just so freaking dope. It's very, very cool and a really creative way. It's not just like Christianizing Dungeons and Dragons, which is what I love. He has this, what Giles is doing, this one side that's like, hey, let's use D&D to build relationships. And then the other side is like, hey, how can we take role-playing games as a concept and a system and apply them to biblical study, which is really interesting. My name is Mark. I'm the pastor at Lutz. You should know that by now. I am here because I love Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing D&D since I was in 6th grade in 1999. My cousin Chip brought a player's handbook to my grandmother's house, and my mother said, well, he's not doing cocaine and he's not getting anybody pregnant, so he can play D&D, and she was right. It did definitely prevent me from getting anybody pregnant or having the opportunities to get anybody pregnant. And so since then, I've been playing D&D. I got on the school bus, and the kid that I would get on with every day, he had Pokemon Blue, I had Pokemon Red, I owned a link cable, and we had 8 AA batteries, my friends. We'd get the big gray Game Boys, and we would link cable and trade Pokemon on the way to school. Found out he had a player's handbook in his house, and I went over to his house. We made our first characters, and I've been playing D&D with Joe ever since. In fact, he texted me last night. He officially got accepted into the FBI, which is wild. And so he's going to be an FBI agent here in a couple of months, and he and I hang out for like 3 hours after we get all of our kids to bed every Sunday night for the most part and play D&D together. And we've been playing D&D together virtually and in person for, I was 12, I'm 36 now, so what's that, 24 years? We've been playing D&D together a really long time. My friend is deconstructed. He is not a believer, but through our time playing D&D together, we have spent more time talking about life and calling often than we do playing D&D. And so Joe fully believes now that God has called him to be an FBI agent, something he would have never uttered before. And a lot of it is because of the conversations not during the game, but around it. And if you've played D&D for any length of time, you know that very frequently what actually happens is you spend more time getting snacks ready and talking about life than you do actually playing the game when you finally sit down to the table, which is what makes D&D so incredibly powerful. And it's one of the reasons that we launched a West Marches style campaign, which I will explain in a little bit, at Lutz. It's our goal is to use Dungeons and Dragons as a tool to build relationships with people. Something happens when people go to battle together. And CrossFit understood this, right? That's why CrossFit, and we call it the CrossFit cult, uses tactics that are very similar to the military, right? Because if you can forge bonds in the heat of a battle, whether you're actually getting shot at or you're just trying to do a muscle up or you're trying to defeat a dragon, you will build a bond during those moments of heightened senses, adrenaline, and excitement that doesn't go away very easily. And Dungeons and Dragons enables us to do that at the table, to build bonds with people that are really unique and are not easily broken. And now years later, I have bonds with friends that I have known for 20 some years, and we will sit down once every couple of years and pull out an old stack of character sheets and go over the stories that we had at 14 and 15 years old, sitting in my buddy's house on a Saturday night playing D&D and eating Gushers until 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Those moments matter to us and they bind us together. So we have looked for ways to mitigate some of the negative sides of some of the hard parts of Dungeons & Dragons in terms of getting a party together and finding a way to play the game together, while also really increasing its positive sides, which is allowing us to find a place to build relationships with people that can lead to times to care for people and have gospel-saturated conversations with folks that would normally never step through the doors of a church. What did we talk about next?
I don't remember.
Perfect. That's perfect. Well, let's do this. I want to take some time and go over. Okay, real quickly, show of hands. Who in here plays Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, so we have some people here. Who is like completely out of the loop? You have no idea anything about Dungeons and Dragons at all. Okay, 1 or 2 people in here. You have nothing, okay, that's perfectly fine. So if you need to pause us at any point, if we're using, Dungeons and Dragons has its own language and we're trying our best not to use it, but if we start using language you don't understand, don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask a question about it. Giles, why don't you share a little bit about how you have been using D&D locally, physically, and the way that you've gone about sort of structuring that stuff in the local, and what fruit that's kind of produced for you here in the Springs area.
So I'm not in the Springs. I'm actually up in Denver.
I'm a liar. In the Denver area.
So with the game store outreach, I started making some relationships with local gamers. I'm not actually running a game at the game store. Another DM said, "Hey, I want to run a game." I'm like, I have been trying to get involved with this community, and I haven't figured out how, because they do Dungeons and Dragons does a thing called the Adventurers League, where you can go in with a pre-built character that's approved by by an official Dungeons and Dragons GM, Game Master or Dungeon Master, and then you can go in and play. It's similar to West Marches, but you're playing officially written Dungeons and Dragons content. They do that on Wednesday nights. I have church on Wednesday nights. We have a house church, so I'm either preaching or supporting our preacher on Wednesday night, so I couldn't do that. He said, I'm gonna run a game. Like, I am gonna be there. I'm gonna make it happen with my schedule. I found out after a couple of weeks of playing, told him I always wear my Disciple Gaming Ministry outfits, whether it's my hoodie or my t-shirt. And I told him what I'm doing. He said, that is awesome. I was raised by an atheist dad and a mom who kept going to all of these different churches and never felt like she was at home. And I wish someone like you existed when I was going to Bible camp and could have played D&D and building that bridge. I'm an agnostic atheist now, but the door is open there. Another member of the community of that actual game was also raised in a very similar situation. Dad is an avowed atheist. Mom goes to a bunch of different churches that love to integrate the Gospel of Thomas and all of the apocryphal books of the apocalypse and things like that. And he's like, yeah, I converted to atheism. Is that really what you did? But he's a nice guy, and I've had some good conversations with him as well, and it's opened the doors to eventually having longer conversations with him. And after having these conversations, I'm going to make sure that I'm opening up the opportunity to just offer to pray for them, because that is a door that is opening with those relationships. On the church side of it, Zach, who everybody's seen running around behind the scenes, connected me with a church that's just a couple of blocks away from me. They do a Dungeons and Dragons game every Tuesday night, right after school, for the high school that's literally on the other side of the fence from their campus. In fact, high schoolers have to walk through the church parking lot to get to the neighborhood where they live. And so I'm going to start working with them on bringing in the Bible study side of the campaign and possibly doing some mentoring with some of the high schoolers. And those are the doors that have been opened because I've been proactively going to churches and going to the gaming store to build these relationships.
Yeah, which is really what D&D ultimately is all about. It's about the opportunity to sit around the table from one another and build relationships with people. And it's one of the few places that we cooperatively come together to actually do that in culture anymore. There's not a lot of places where we just meet to hang out and we're all just going to sit here and talk to one another and just be together for hours. It just doesn't, I mean, come on, most people will give you an hour of their time, but you get a D&D group together and they will give you hours and hours of their time. So let me talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at Lutz, and I'm gonna give you some structure stuff. If you are a D&D player thinking about structuring something, it might be a good place to grab a couple of notes. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. If you wanna talk to me afterwards, that's fine too. Is anybody here familiar with the term a West Marches style campaign? 1. Perfect. 2, okay. A couple of people, yeah, we're in the last one, that doesn't count. Okay, if you're here last time, doesn't count. Okay, so a West Marches style campaign is a version of playing Dungeons and Dragons that uses the same rules and can use any other tabletop RPG system. I've played a lot of different TTRPGs. Dungeons and Dragons is like Kleenex or tissue is to whatever, you understand what I mean, what a Kleenex is to, everyone thinks it's all Dungeons and Dragons. It's not. Dungeons and Dragons is one role-playing game. There are hundreds of other role-playing games. You want to play Alien versus Predator? You can. You want to play After Our Last Airbender? You can. You want to play Star Wars? You can. You want to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? You can. Power Rangers? You can. They're all out there, right? And so this can actually work in a setting for just about any of them, but I'm going to talk about it in the context of Dungeons and Dragons.
Can you mention what a TTRPG is for people who might not be familiar with that term? Great,
yeah, we've been translating for each other.
Yep.
TTRPG is tabletop role-playing game.
Sometimes called pen and paper.
Yeah, also. So a West Marches campaign is an attempt to take some of the really drawbacks of a normal Dungeons and Dragons group and expand it to a much larger crowd. So one of the normal drawbacks and what kills most groups that try to get together to play Dungeons and Dragons is you get 5 people together. We're gonna meet every Tuesday night. And then Tim misses 5 Tuesdays in a row. And now you can't play anymore. And now you forgot where you were. And so now you come back and you're like, okay, I guess we're starting something new because Tim's back this week. And then Tim misses 2 more weeks, right? And then you're like, well, maybe we just won't play anymore. And that is the story of most Dungeons & Dragons players. At the same time, D&D is a cultural phenomenon right now because of Stranger Things. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people are super interested in D&D. And more celebrities are coming out and saying, I play Dungeons & Dragons. And so more and more people are finding it socially acceptable to do so and want to explore it, which creates a beautiful and awesome opportunity for the church if we can overcome some of the obvious difficulties in getting the same group together every single week for 3 or 4 hours in a night, right? Which is really hard. Cue in the West Marches style campaign. In a West Marches style campaign, you have a grouping. Usually, you can do it with one, but you often have a grouping of game masters, people who are going to run game sessions, who offer one-time adventures over the course of a month. At least that's how we do it. They put out descriptions, what character level you need to be in order to come and join one of these campaigns or one of these sessions, and a little bit of information about what is going to happen during it. And then players willingly sign up for those things and say, hey, during that day and time, I can come and I can be part of it. And I have a character that can come and be part of it. Which means as a player, you don't have to be there every single week. You can show up this week and then you can show up a month from now. Or you can come and play 3 sessions this week if there's 3 available that week. It allows you to play at your own speed and at your own place. You also get to play with different players most of the time, which is really fun because you get to meet new people. You don't have to play with the same exact people. You can also experience different dungeon masters and different ways of running games, which is also oftentimes really fun. You get to have a couple of different experiences. Now, there's more than one way to do a West Marches campaign, but this is how we do it. There's a couple of ground rules in order to make it happen. In the typical Dungeons and Dragons game, you might start out in a tavern, and 4 hours later, you might be sitting in the middle of a goblin camp in the woods, right? And you're gonna stop there, and when we come back next week, we'll pick up in the goblin camp. In a West Marches style campaign, every session begins and ends in the same location. They all begin at the guild hall, or the castle, or the city, whatever it is that you want it to be. For us, it's the guild hall. Every one of our sessions starts in the guild hall. Every one of our sessions ends in the guild hall. After 3 hours, no matter what's happened, we will narratively end the session in a few short lines, and we are back at the guild hall. That way, if you want to pick up your character and play them tomorrow night or next year, you know that your character's already at the guild hall. And that's where the campaign or the next session is going to pick up. And you can jump in with somebody else each time. There's a couple of positives and negatives of this type of gaming. On the positive side, it gets rid of the fact that if Tim doesn't show up, we can't play together, right? Because if Tim doesn't want to sign up, it's not a big deal. We're flexible because different people can sign up for each one. You don't have to keep it rhythmic. It doesn't have to be on the same week all the time. You can change the day. You can change the time, and different players will sign up for it. It gives the ability for people to meet and experience different dungeon masters and a different group of people each week, which is really fun. It allows your dungeon masters to work together to collaboratively create a world for the players to engage in and have fun in. And it allows the players to create that world together. The thing that one of their characters did over here in one part of your world, well, then another person who plays next week gets to go and experience that thing that these other people did. Makes the world feel alive, right? So one adventuring party goes out and they go into a cave and they kill the Goblin King inside the cave. Well, next week, the Goblin King's dead, so another monster's moved in there to take up residence because he's a scavenger, and another adventuring party is called out to go kill the thing that went into that cave because there was a Goblin King there before, but there isn't anymore. Well, now that party comes back and they say, guess what we killed in the cave? Well, you guys killed the Goblin King there last week. Well, guess what moved in there this week? And they get to continue that narrative and collectively build a land together. Let's talk about a few of the negatives. A lot of times in Dungeons & Dragons, one of the best things is the ability to build relationships with the same group of people around the table. You learn the other players' character quirks and traits. You learn what they like and what they don't like. You roleplay with them over time and really grow a bond together. In a West Marches style campaign, that can't really happen. It's a little bit more campy, a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more drinking a beer and chucking dice than it is a hardcore regular D&D session that builds one off of the other. The other thing that's a negative is that you can't be as much about character backstories. And we all, if we play D&D, have that one guy with the 35-page backstory, and he wants you to know everything that has happened and wants you to integrate everything that has happened every day of his character's life, leading him to the point of starting tonight. That can't happen in West Marches. You can't put that on your dungeon masters. They simply cannot incorporate character backstories. Players have to be okay that the fun part of this game is collectively telling the story and building a world and expanding a world together. That's the fun part. The fun part is that thing that ended up on the map that wasn't there before because you discovered it and you got to name it. And now everybody else that goes back there knows that you named that one fortress on the map that got found. That's the fun part of a West Marches style campaign. You also have to realize that there are some limitations on West Marches style campaigns in the fact that yes, it does open up opportunities for more people to play and more people to come and engage, and it gives you more opportunities for ministry, which is really, really cool, building relationships with a wider range of people. But then on top of that, it does also mean that people can pop in and pop out and you don't get the chance to meet with them again, or maybe they didn't like something or had a bad experience at one point and they decide they're not going to come and play with you anymore. Some positives and negatives about it. In our church, we don't have anything that's saturated with the gospel in terms of our game. Our game is entirely secular. Our group created our world, our players play in it. The only thing that is Christian is at the end, our dungeon masters take prayer concerns. That's it. At the end of a session, we close down, we end at the guild hall, and as we're wrapping up, my DMs say, hey guys, what we like to do here as Dungeon Masters is pray for our players. If there's anybody who has a prayer concern, would you let me know, and I'd be glad to pray for it. And our Dungeon Masters don't have to pray out loud, but they often do. They take notes on those things, and they share them in a chat in our Discord that's just for our Dungeon Masters and our prayer team, and then we pray over those things. What it also does is now they're in our server, which means they are going to get a ping every time our church goes live on Twitch. And slowly but surely, almost every person who's come and hung out with us in D&D who wasn't a Christian has started coming to church on Wednesday nights because they've experienced community and friendship amongst our church through D&D and realized that not all Christians are D-bags, and they decided then that they were going to come and hang out with us during a Wednesday night and come to church with us. So that's the structure of what we're doing, it kind of how we have it built. Also a little bit about Giles and how he has it built with his local gaming and his some of his stuff with like discipleship and experiencing biblical storylines. With that being said, we have plenty of time left for questions. We're going to spend the rest of the time. If you have questions, D&D is such a blank canvas. It's very easy to go a lot of different directions. So feel free, ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer.
Where did West Marches come from?
Oh.
I don't know. I Googled it once, and it was between projects at work, so I had about 5 seconds, and then I had to jump back on the project.
So I didn't really know more than you. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So West Marches style campaign come in a lot of shapes and flavors, and they're run in different ways. Some of them you get your party together and then you find a dungeon master to run something for you. I experienced them first through Discord, and there's Discords with thousands of people in them that are exclusively dedicated to a big giant world where dozens of Dungeon Masters run sessions, and you just go and sign up for one and go and play in it. So it just became a way for people to, I think it came out of Adventure League, which is kind of like the sanctioned Wizards of the Coast version, which is kind of like a West Marches style campaign. But they can be structured a lot of different ways. I don't know exactly where it came from, but I knew that it existed. So that's all, yeah. Yeah, Mika.
So as somebody who has only played D&D,
Yeah, one of the things that Mika is basically asking is, like, in D&D, it's a pretty hard to get into thing because it has multiple hundreds of pages rule books. There is tons of information, and most of us that play D&D have been playing for a really long time, and we know more about it than we should. And so I can give you stat blocks from 3rd edition D&D from when I was a teenager. That's not very helpful for anybody. And so it's an intimidating thing to get into. So Giles, how have you helped people who are new kind of break into the hobby and just get involved and sit down and play?
So a great example is actually Steven. Dr. Level Up joined us for the game that I ran a couple nights ago. There were a few new people, a few veterans at the table. So the first thing I did was say, here's your sheet, sit next to these people, ask questions. But then when it came to roll X and Y, I would specifically look, okay, here's where you're gonna find it on the page. And this is what you're gonna do. And then we'll go from there. And that's what I've been doing with my sister-in-law, who she's, the campaign that she's in right now is the first one she's ever been a part of. So I will kind of hand walk the players through how to play the game, and a lot of times I will whiff the rolls for the NPCs, so that way they know what the danger is, but also what their consequences are for putting themselves in dangerous situations. And I'll tell them, okay, you need to do X and Y. Then you don't have to read the book. That puts a big onus on me to have a better handle on the rules, but I can walk them through like tutorial mode. Like if you're playing a video game for the very first time, they're gonna walk you step by step. This is what you do first, this is what you do next. And I'll repeat that as many times as necessary. There are still times, she's been playing about 2 years now, and there are still times where I'll tell her, this is what you need to do next, this is what you need to do next, because I want the players to know how to play the game until they know how to be confident in it. And it's more fun when they know that the GM is on their side. So that's how I integrate players. I'll walk them through step by step on what the rules are to make sure that they know, and then I'll teach them where to find the rules if they do own a copy of the book, and then make sure that they're playing with veteran players as much as possible. I try to avoid having tables that are all brand new players. I'm willing to do it, but it's always easier when I have another player who's willing to play back up and do kind of a rules coaching thing for those new players, because I'll forget stuff too.
Yeah. So structurally, we've asked the same question a lot because we have a lot of people who are interested but feel intimidated about getting involved. And so we do a couple of things. One, we have a player character creation party. Every single month, one of our Dungeon Masters on a Thursday at 6 p.m. will sit down in a voice chat, and anybody who wants to learn how to make a character, he will sit down with you for up to 3 hours. He sits there and just step by step helps people. He'll pull them up on what we use software-wise, a site called D&D Beyond, and it creates your character sheet virtually, so you don't have to have a pen and paper out, and he'll take you step by step through the process of how to create a character. And then we follow that up by the exact same the following week at 6 p.m. on Thursday. He runs a first level adventure. So you already know the Dungeon Master. You have an idea about the people who are going to be playing with you because they likely just created characters with you. And then the next week, you just get to jump in as a level 1 character and experience D&D. And what we did was we created a town in our world in a time loop, like Groundhog Day. Same thing happens every single month in that town. And so the players go out and they go into this town that's a time loop, and my Dungeon Masters don't have to recreate the wheel every month to create something new. He runs the same exact session with new players every single month, and at the end of it, they have experienced how to do social stuff in the game, how to make skill checks, how to go into combat, how to role play, how a game flow is going to be, what they can think they're going to experience if they sign up for any of our other games. And then they can go to what we call our guild board, which is just a Discord channel, where we have posted all of the games that are coming up over the next month with their date and their time, and their description, that you just have to hit a little emoji to say, I'm going to be there. And after you're done with your first adventure, you can go in there. The other way that we do it is we tell people, you can just come and hang out. You don't have to play. If you just want it, you see a game coming up, you can join that game and be muted. As long as you're not like interfering with the game itself, you can just hang out in there and listen. And so we give people the chance to kind of get an experience of what it might be like without ever having to commit to showing up. So you can just pop in for any length of time that you want and just mute yourself and listen to the game. It's a way for people to feel like they can kind of get into it a little bit. The last thing that we do is in post-service after church, we have a D&D conversation channel where one of our dungeon masters hangs out most weeks. And so he'll get there, answer questions, talk about characters, talk about what we do. And in 2 weeks, he is leading a just show up and play. And so for 30 minutes after church, he'll already have your character made. He'll already have everything that you need. You literally just pop in and you'll jump in. And he'll teach you how to play in 30 minutes. And then you're ready to go. You can create a character and jump into our campaign further on the server. So yeah, you do need to create really intentional ways for people to onboard. Otherwise, all that you get is a bunch of D&D vets, people who have been playing for years and are just reading as much stuff and watching as many YouTube videos as they can. And you don't really get those people who are genuinely curious you might be able to build a really cool relationship with. Yeah.
So Paul tells his readers, everything you do it for Christ. Do everything as if God's watching you, because he is, and because everything that we do is it's a reflection of our worship for God. So a lot of that can come down to how do you interact with other players, especially the toxic ones. How are you going to play your character when a moral decision is presented? There are going to be a lot of opportunities for you to just say something kind to another player. If there's a brand new player, there's an opportunity for you to take them under your wing, show them the kindness of helping relieve some of the fear of being a brand new player in a scary situation.
I think for me, the first one is maybe the obvious one, which is like, don't check your faith at the door when you're going to play D&D. Right? Like your faith goes with you, and who you are needs to be who you are no matter where you are, right? And if you're a follower of Jesus, the fact that you're a follower of Jesus goes with you. Now, as a follower of Jesus, I am not compelled at all to only play like good aligned, always make the right moral choice characters, right? Like currently, I am not playing that with me and my buddy. Like I'm playing I'm not even going to get into it because it's not important. But that's not what I'm playing, right? Yeah, exactly. Social contract, you guys. That's the important part is that for me, it is that I am who I am in that environment. And the person that Mark is not a person that only plays lawful good paladins because they look the most like Jesus, right? I play a wide variety of characters because I love role playing, and I am me. Now, in that, I think one of the areas in which I try to be very intentional is that with my gaming group, which is just 2 of us, by the way, because we have kids and we're too freaking busy to get a whole group of people together, right? Is that the first thing that I ask when I get on the call, hey man, how you doing? Like I give ample room to not play. Like when I show up to the D&D game as a player, or even as the DM, my primary goal is not to play D&D. My primary goal is to connect with the people that I'm playing with. And that sometimes means that instead of playing D&D, I just talk. And we just talk about life. And sometimes it means that after D&D, although I want to go to bed, I just talk. And it means that the people that I'm playing D&D with, I actually try to engage with outside of D&D, right? Like, hey, do you want to play Baldur's Gate with me? And I sit down and me and Joe play Baldur's Gate on another random night. Or, hey, one of the guys who's ran in a bunch of our D&D stuff is in my small group at Lutz now, right? Invited him to come and join us for our small group. And that invitation was accepted, and now he's part of our small group. And so, I think for a lot of us who play D&D, and this is a really hard one, it's that like your love for D&D has to go on the altar for it to be ministry. Right? You have to be willing to give it to God. And if it's just yours, which D&D for most of my life has been, it's going to be really hard for you to have gospel impact on people's lives, right? Like you have to surrender it and say, hey, I am going to play D&D because this is a point of passion of mine and God has placed that in me, and that's great. But just doing really cool things with my character isn't going to be my primary focus. The people around the table are going to be my primary focus, and looking into them and seeing if I can care for them in some way or be there for them in some way is going to be more important to me than, making sure that I level up or I get a new piece of treasure this week. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. Anybody else with a question?
So from
Yeah, David.
West Marches,
That's a great question. So for us, what we do is on the third Monday of every month at 5:30, my dungeon masters and I get together and we talk about what happened in our games over the past month, and we talk about where we want to do things in the world. We talk about any problem children that we have in our games. So we always have one of those. And then we go through and decide who's going to offer what game when, what day, what time, and then we go through and we post those in the Discord in chronological order. And then we let people use an emoji to react to it to sign up for it. And so if we have like a new group of players, we would be like, yep, on the third Thursday of this month, there will be a first level session available. Come and join us. And so in our scenario, we don't have players that come together and say, we want a game, and then tell that to our dungeon masters, and our dungeon masters have to do it. And our dungeon masters, because their time is important, get to choose what type of sessions they want to run and when they're going to run them and when they have time available. And then players who are available can sign up for them. That's what worked for us. In other West Marches style campaigns, that's not the case. Right? In others, you get your party together, say, hey, we want to do Curse of Strahd, which is a pre-made campaign, and we want someone to do that for us. Is there a DM out there that'd be willing to do it? Then a DM will respond, a dungeon master will respond. That's not how we do it, but it can be done that way.
Let me ask a little more about the pen and paper side.
So I said in the last session, and I say it in a lot of the presentations that I make, the most I can handle is 6 players. I think, structurally speaking, for me to build solid relationships because of the way that I am good at building relationships, and this will obviously change over time as I continue to improve in the skills that God's given me. I can handle about 6 deep relationships at a time with that particular setting. Granted, I balance that with a lot of other deep relationships too, but when I am at a gaming table, especially as the GM, if I get more than 6 players, it makes it a lot harder for each player to have their own thing, to tell their part of the story, and it makes it harder for me to improve the challenges in a way that doesn't also result in the party getting wiped out. It was a great example with the game that I was running this last week. The player level versus the NPCs that I could bring in. If I bring in fewer NPCs, so that way we have, let's say, 6 players and then 3 NPCs that the players can actually successfully overcome, those NPCs do enough damage that 6 rounds in, they've taken out the entire party, and they're still standing. So it's figuring out the balance there, but relationally, making sure that I have time to give each person a chance to talk about maybe their wife's looking for a new job and they have to move out of state. A member of our team, one of the groups that I lead, that's what they're looking at. They're moving out of state in January, and he's going to have to leave because we're not doing it online. If they want to talk about prayer requests that they have, I want to make sure that everybody gets their time. So scalability with my method isn't difficult as far as numbers are concerned. Spiritual growth is the bigger focus. That's why it's disciple gaming ministry. It's the discipleship. My uncle, who's a pastor, reminded me that discipleship, the most important thing, and we see this in Jesus, in Paul, between Elijah and Elisha, it's deeply personal relationships. So the discipleship focus is where I'm going. So it's rather than trying to find as many people as possible in my game, it's trying to find as many churches as possible to implement it with a small group of, maybe if they can handle 12 people, 6 to 12 people in a small group, just like your standard home group at a church or a life group or whatever they're going to call it. So that way they can have a leader who is invested in deeply personal relationships that will last and have meaning. That's one of the things that I'm doing this both as a parachurch organization with the church where I serve as an elder and pastor. So I know that as an elder, not everybody's called. I wasn't called to be an elder until 2016. The 18 on my hoodie is the year that I was. That was the year that I was ordained. That was the year that I went back to school to actually earn a degree to equip myself to be a better pastor. And so I know that not everybody's called to that. If he wants to do that, I'm more than willing to help him do that. And we have talked about that a little bit more with his daughter and her junior high friends. But ideally, yes, I would equip them for that. And anybody who's interested in doing that, that is one of the things that I offer on my website is training on how to go into a church and game setting and do discipleship. But the scalability from that side, I'm not sure. I don't have a great answer yet because I haven't been doing it long enough. But up to this point, it's been about investing in a few people to then see how it can start to expand.
Yeah, and for us, it's just a numbers game, right? If you want 5 players in a game and you have 25 people that want to play, you need 5 games offered. If each of your DMs can only afford 1 game a month, then you need 5 DMs, right? And so just like a small group, right? You got 200 people who are interested in small groups. You don't want them small groups bigger than 10 people. You need 20 small group leaders. And how do you develop a dungeon master? Same way you develop a small group leader. You do it by example. You disciple them, but you're discipling them into how to be a game master, and not just obviously, like, we train people up to do things all the time, and so you're just training them on how to be better game masters.
And I will add, Mark and I have both faced this in ministry, because you're a pastor. Everybody comes to you with good ideas. And somebody in your church is going to come to you, or somebody is going to go to your pastor and say, this is a good idea, you should do it. What that pastor wants is for you to go to them and say, this is a good idea, will you equip me to do it? Because if you are willing to step in and do it, and you can prove its viability and its staying power, it's not going to last just a week, 2 weeks. They are going to be thrilled to have somebody who's a part of the community, who is invested in the community and giving back, rather than giving them something else that they have to figure out to do. Because chances are they don't have the time or the bandwidth. Even if you're at a giant church with thousands of people who can show up, the staff is going to be overworked already.
Far more likely to be overworked, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Other questions about how to set things up, to run? Sparking ideas for you?
I've got one. This
Yeah.
is just.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dungeons and Dragons players love to find their own. And all you got to do is fly the flag to find them, right? And so that flag can look a lot of different ways, right? And one of the reasons I say I think this is a cool opportunity for a church is it brings a lot of people in that would normally never step foot through the doors of your church, right? A lot of people who've been hurt and burned by the church. And it turns out most people are passionate enough about D&D that they'll go into a place they hate to play it. But they go into a buddy's basement already, right? And it's like just humid and disgusting, and I've played in like really gross attics and it's just like crazy hot, but I just really want to play D&D. Like, even as not a Christian, I think if you had a nice environment to go to that was going to be set up and have the resources that you need, it's going to have some drinks, maybe some snacks out for you, you weren't just eating greasy pizza again, and you had like some stuff that was there and available in a nice space that was actually like temperature controlled, and you could come there and play D&D, people would come out of the freaking woodwork for that, right? So if I was going to do this on a campus, I would be like, hey, can we find a place on campus that we could host an interest group, right? A meeting. Say, is there anybody out there that plays Dungeons and Dragons that would be interested in helping us get something started on campus for D&D players? And I bet you would get people that would come out because you flew the flag and they're looking for their own. And then I bet from that, if you had a plan in place to say, hey, we'd like to start this campaign, it's going to happen on every X night here inside of this nice space that we can game in and the school's going to let us use. And anybody else you can invite to come out and be players, and they can swap groups and parties, and we're going to build this collaborative world together. I bet you would find that would take off pretty quickly for people, and it would give you an environment and a place to build relationship that you then might, as like for a campus ministry, be able to invite people to a Bible study or a group because they're actually building and engaging with other people who are Christians who are playing D&D with them, which is foreign to them, like not an idea that they're very familiar with. I think that D&D players just want to play D&D. And if they had the option, they'd love to play it in a place that wasn't crazy hot or crazy cold or stupid humid. And they'd love to play it in a place where somebody else was worried about collecting the DM and they knew they got to play whenever they showed up. And they weren't just going to be texting their friend who slept through D&D time and realizing tonight's just another night they're not going to be able to play. And I think most D&D players would jump up. I would have jumped up on an opportunity like that, like given the chance.
And if you're working on college campuses, find a faculty member who might be into it. I guarantee you these days there are probably at least 2 faculty members on any decent-sized college campus that would either love to learn D&D for the first time or would like to get back to it for the first time since they finished their bachelor's degree. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for them to then spread the word. Even if they're not necessarily Christian, it gets more people in the door. It's the same as if you want to get kids into D&D, get their dad to jump into his first character since he was in college. He's 45 years old now, and he has a 16-year-old who's like, yeah, Dad, I want to do this. Well, my buddy's going to run. We'll do this together as a parent bonding situation. You get faculty and students learning mentorship and Dungeons & Dragons and telling stories together on campus.
And this works really well at a high school level too. I have one guy in our church, he's not a Christian, name's Lord Shadow, and he works at a school in special needs. He goes every week and he leads D&D club for the middle school. And he has over 20 kids signed up to come to D&D club, and they have to put them on a rotation. The school that I graduated from, my mother-in-law is a substitute at, the local youth pastor volunteered to come in and run D&D club for the school. Same exact scenario, over 20 kids in the middle school signed up to come to D&D club, freaking raving about it, they love it. And he actually has to have them on a rotation until he can find other people to come in with him and run games with him. And so there's a really cool opportunity there, because a lot of schools are actually really open to like someone coming in and helping kids who play in Magic the Gathering, or someone coming in, and it's like a weird opportunity because they know that they have kids in there that aren't in sports, and they want to get them engaged somehow in school and after school activities, and they recognize that there's nerds in their school and they're not really sure how to get them plugged in. And so things like D&D after school, Magic the Gathering after school, even things like anime, we'll get you doing Jesus Otaku after school. There's tons of kids, teachers are like, man, I have no clue how to reach this kid because I don't know anything about this anime thing that they're doing, and they come dressed up every day. But if you had the opportunity to be like, hey, yeah, we're going to do a thing where we're going to come in together and we're going to do a club where we talk about whatever the anime is, like people would, like a lot of schools are completely down for opportunities like that. It'll actually give you access to come in. Yeah.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, it's very true in nerd culture. Yeah, good, Boots.
So for people who are looking to either have a
If they want to do Dungeons & Dragons specifically, you can get started for $75, I think, is the cost.
in-person, correct?
Yeah, individual players are going to have to invest in their own dice most likely, but $75 gets you the core rule books, I believe. I think it might be a little bit more than that.
It's
Maybe-
different. 2024 rules are coming out right now, but yeah.
Kits for $20, $30 too.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
wanna do that.
Yeah, so you can also get for free. They have a lot of the core rules with a lot of the frills stripped out that you can then adapt to your own settings. So there are some free things that Wizards of the Coast offers. There are other companies that offer even cheaper things. There's a company called Modiphius Games that releases the Fallout, Star Trek,
Alien.
yeah, they offer a bunch of games, and they have a PDF guarantee. So you buy one copy, you get a PDF that you can then send to everybody. Evil Hat Productions does the same thing. So if you want to play, say, Blades in the Dark, one of your favorites, or Scum and Villainy, which is one that I just ran at a local game store, you buy the book, you send a picture, and the head of the marketing department, or if it's the Evil Hat Productions, it'll be the founder and CEO and only full-time employee, will email you within 10 minutes on the day after Christmas with your copy of the free PDF. True story. And then you can disseminate that PDF as long as you're not pirating it to the people in your gaming group. So it can be as cheap as $20 or $30. It can be as expensive as, if you want to spend thousands of dollars on it, it can be however much you want to spend. It can fit easily within a youth group budget.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say for us, it's cost us nothing except time.
Which in a lot of ways is everything.
Yeah. The higher cost is time. Like legitimately, the higher cost for starting something like this is time. It takes a lot of time.
You do that beyond subscription, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so I personally already have a D&D Beyond subscription, right? And so if you really wanted to do it, and you, like for us, what we ended up having is three of our 4 dungeon masters have already bought every book digitally on D&D Beyond, and they just host a link for us to use all of that material in their campaign. And little cheat code, if you're a D&D Beyond user, if you have someone who owns all the books and they put up a campaign with content sharing enabled, if people join that, they can have up to 12 people in a campaign, right? If you join the campaign through a link and you leave that as an evergreen link, they can join the campaign, create their character, and leave the campaign, letting other people join it. And then they can rejoin it with the link to adjust their character at any time and give them unlimited access to all of the books. If you wanted to go on D&D Beyond and buy everything, it's probably going to cost you $500 or $600 to go in. If you get them on sale, it might cost you less. And you could buy all of the books on D&D Beyond and supply that link for your ministry or your group.
That's just the core books, the actual rules books. If you want to get the campaign books as well, you're looking at about 1,000.
Okay, looking about $1,000.
Because I've been looking every day.
Okay, and then other than that, like you can get on Amazon and you can buy like a sack of dice for like $7, and or max 15, $20. They're gonna have 50 sets of dice in it, and then you show up, you get the 3 core rule books. You get a big sack of dice, and you can show up and do it in your church or in your home and get D&D going. It's a pretty inexpensive way to launch a ministry. Yeah.
Check your local library.
Oh yeah, your local library very frequently has access to all the books.
Yeah.
Depends on your players and what they want to play and what your GM is good at. D&D is the easy one to go to because everybody knows it. If everybody knows D&D and wants to play something like D&D, but they hate Wizards of the Coast as a company, you can go with Pathfinder, which is kind of a different direction that the company went after the 4th edition rules for D&D were released. A lot of people said, no,
we don't talk about those. We don't talk about that era.
I will say some of the best campaigns I had were 4th edition, but it was about the players and the friends. But yeah, so Pathfinder is another option. So it really comes down to the players and the group that you want to play with.
Yeah, and I would say for me, Jeff, there isn't an option. I'm not switching. We play D&D, and we're going to play D&D. And that is because most people who are searching are looking for D&D. They're not out there looking and being like, you know what I'm really looking for? A really gritty burning wheel game. I am looking for that, right? I love that, but there's very few other people who we're unapologetically an outreach. We're not discipling people, we are just an outreach.
Yep.
Once you're in our server and we're praying for you, you have friendship with a Christian who's not a jerk. And that's our real goal. Come play D&D with us. We're not going to force Christ down your throat. And we didn't get into this. We got into this last time. But what do you do with toxic players in difficult situations? People who come in and we have a couple of things that we put in place in our campaign, like a code of conduct and a social contract, right? And so for us, it's not written, but our social contract is if the dungeon master is going to take his time and energy or her time and energy to build the session, you as the player should not be a jerk in the session, right? Don't try to ruin it. And if you do, you don't get to play with us anymore. Our code of conduct is baked right into our game. Every one of our players has to play a warden, which is just a guardian of the land, right? We built our world on a post-war era where everything was lost to time in the wilderness, right? So I don't have to create anything. This is no one knows what it is, and you get to create it for me. We go in, and players are like, I wonder if there's a dragon on that mountaintop. And I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. There's a dragon on that mountaintop now. I didn't know what was on that mountaintop. They think they discovered something. What they did is just created something for me, right? And so this code of conduct just means that if you don't want to play a sort of altruistic character in our groups, you can't play. That's not inherently Christian. It's guarding for my dungeon masters because they can't prepare when they don't know what characters they're going to have for the lawful good paladin and the evil necromancer that wants to kill the whole party and raise them from the dead for his own bidding, right? If you will not agree to being a warden that takes on this set of oaths. And if you're unfamiliar with maybe where we got this from, we got it from Peterson's Mouse Guard series. Peter's to be a guard mouse, you had to have a specific oath that you took. And so all of our characters who are player characters have to take that oath. It allows us to align our characters' motives and plan our sessions a little bit easier. Without that, you really can't plan anything, and it just gets chaotic and divisive inside of groups. Whenever they all have an alignment in terms of they're all kind of aiming for the same thing, protect the people, pretty simple thing. Robin Hood-esque characters, right? Not robbing the rich, but protect the people. When that's in place, it's very easy to create scenarios. We know that's a primary motivator for every person who's going to come into a session. So all that we got to do is put the people in danger. and that's a consistent trope throughout all of our sessions, right? Yeah.
If I'm going to be GMing with a bunch of people that I've never played with before, 2 things I'm never going to do. I'm not going to run a bunch of chaotic evil players, and I'm not going to run any horny bards. I will not have sex in my games. If that happens, it's in your mind off the table. It's not something I'm going to do. It's just flat out not something I'm going to deal with. And if that's what you want from the game, we find that out in session 0. I'm either going to convince you this isn't the game for you, or I'm going to talk you into playing a different type of character, because those are the types of people that I'm going to play with, are the ones who don't want that in their game as well.
And we have a bit of a code of conduct for our dungeon masters as well. There's certain subjects that we won't breach. We don't deal with kidnapping. We typically won't deal with drowning. We don't deal with rape. We don't deal with child sacrifice. Like, these are just things that don't happen in our world, because we don't want to get into situations where we trigger somebody or really have a hard situation that somebody is having to deal with. And so we don't have stuff that's super graphic, and we're very clear. We have a whole series of videos that you watch before you get involved, and we're pretty clear about what you can expect, right? It's a fun, campy time. We have characters with weird, quirky personalities. People are just, we're there to have fun together. And you as the dungeon master, your job, and our dungeon masters know this, is not to like have fun by telling a crazy story or by dumping a bunch of random facts about the thing that you created on people. People don't care about that. People want to have fun. And the most fun that you're going to have as a dungeon master is that people want to come back and play again. And so we're really clear with our DMs. Your job is to have fun. You're not a rules lawyer. If you need to change things or squeak things to make sure that it's fun, we're trying to create epic moments around the table that people will share with one another and come back in those stories to. We want those epic moments to happen. And so in one of my games, when the dragon flew up and he got killed by the arrow, I knew that the guy coming next was going to hit him with a fireball. And I knew that that was going to be cooler than him dying by an arrow. So he didn't get to die by an arrow. But he did die when he got hit by the fireball. And he came plummeting from the sky through the clouds into a cloud of smolders and rocked the ground and shook it. And it was so cool. And my players had that epic moment, and they got to share in that experience. And then they got to go back to the guild hall. And they're all typing in chat, right, what they experienced. We brought a dragon head back. And it was super cool, right? It was super fun. And the point is that you really want your players to have fun and enjoy their time, because it's inside that place of fun that they build bonds with one another, that they share memories with one another. And it is in that place that people then suddenly feel comfortable to say, my dad's really sick in the hospital. I just lost my job. I'm really depressed right now. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had post-game at Lutz with people who are like, hey, can we meet one-on-one? I get into a conversation with them one-on-one outside of D&D, and they just bare their soul because they've learned to trust me over the game. And that's really what the goal is, right? So it's not the game. It's that we get a chance to minister to people and care for people that otherwise would never step foot through the doors of a church. I told this story in the last one. Pones came to our church to play D&D. That was it. He heard we played D&D. He heard he could show up and play without having to be the dungeon master, so he showed up. It's about a 6'3", black-bearded, black-haired dude who intimidates everybody he sees, drives a school bus, right? Has a storied past and lives on Jersey Shore, right? He came in a couple months later and he told me, like, he was driven out of the church because of D&D. And he came back, he started getting really involved. Eventually he signed up, filled out an application to become a dungeon master. We brought him on as a dungeon master. He started running games. He didn't believe in anything. He started coming back to faith. He went from just us taking his prayer concerns to him taking other people's prayer concerns to him actively praying for people at the end of service, at the end of an adventure. Now any opportunity that he actually has, he doesn't have to be up too early the next day, he comes to church on Wednesday nights. And Pones will tell you it was D&D that drove him out of the church and D&D that brought him back. And so those are the real stories as a ministry that you're after. Those are the stories of life change. Something as silly as chucking dice and pretending to kill goblins can change someone's eternal destination. Like that's the end goal. You can't take your eyes off of that to think that your end goal has become, this world that you created on an endless stream of notepaper.
We can't all be Matthew Mercer.
Yeah, and you can't all, if you don't know Matthew Mercer, he's like the most famous dungeon master from a show called Critical Role. But yeah, any other questions? Yeah, good. Great question. So we have a first come, first served basis for us. And so if you sign up, you're in. However, that being said, we prioritize players with less characters. And so we allow people to have more than one character in our world. And you can have as many as you want as long as you're actively playing them. However, let's say I have somebody who has 4 characters in our world at varying levels, and I have someone with just 1. And we have too many people signed up for a game. Let's say a dungeon master's comfortable with taking 6 and we have 7 people signed up. we will reach out to somebody who has multiple characters and say, hey, can you step out of this one so this other person can step in? We'll do the same with new players. If we have a vet who plays in a lot of games, we'll reach out and say, hey, this new player really wants to get in on this low-level session. Do you mind stepping out this week and letting them come in? But keep in mind as well, like, we're all super flexible as dungeon masters, and usually adding one more player isn't the end of the world for us, right? Adding 10 more players would be, but like squeaking out like 1 or 2 more players, we just roll with it. Like most of the time we just roll with it, let them come and play. We just, like, our sessions only ever have 1 battle in them anyway. And so the battling is not the hard part, nor is it the fun part for us. Like, they have fun in the battle, but our whole goal is to make the characters feel heroic in it. It's not to, like, grind them down and, like, make them on the edge of death all the time. We have those moments, but for the most part, most of my players just blow away my encounters, both because I suck at rolling dice, but also because D&D is built for 6 to 8 encounters in an adventuring day, and I usually get a chance to throw them through 1 or maybe 1.5 in an adventuring day, and so they are just like fully charged and ready to go. They're not depleted in their characters' resources at all. So combat is never like the main focus for us. It is getting around the table, having fun together, doing some role playing, solving a mystery, and doing a battle and fighting something at the end. For some players, they don't like that. They'll play with us once or twice and decide that's not for them, but for the most part, people enjoy it.
And a lot of it, too, is going to depend on what your group wants and what your group can handle. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. If you have a GM who can handle, and I told the story in the last session, there was another game system called Legend of the Five Rings, and there were 2 professional dungeon masters. They're basically, most of their full-time job was dungeon mastering. They ran a game. It was an 8-hour game where one of them was in one ballroom at this big convention in Palm Springs with 40 players, and they were attacking a castle. The other dungeon master was in the other room with 40 players, and they were defending the castle. And the 2 dungeon masters would go from table to table to table with each squad that was on each section of that of the attack, and they would find out what each table is doing. Then they would meet in the hallway between the 2 ballrooms, share the information, and then go back and move on from there. That's something that certain people can do. I can't do that. If you know people who can do that, first of all, more power to you, because that is a magnificent skill that is very valuable in any place. That your organizational skills are probably 6 Sigma certification worthy. So if anybody's laughing, they probably know what that means. Supply chain, woo! So yeah, it really depends on your group. And if you don't think you can handle it, then the next step is to try to find more leaders who are willing to step up. And that may be a member who has been playing long enough that you think they're ready to take on a leadership role. Some of them may not want to. Don't force them. But if you know somebody who is almost there, maybe get them to take that risk. See how it goes, and then go forward from there.
Our experience is we usually have more people who want to be dungeon masters than we want. And it's an experience thing. When we have someone who's a new DM, we always have one of our current DMs create a character and play in their sessions for the first couple of times, just as like a backup and a little person to help with rules. And then we kind of get there. It's like David's new to DMing, and so he's been running games. The first couple, we've had either Pones or Capsian from our community in his games with a character, just to be there to help out in case a rule came up that he wasn't familiar with or something happened that he just needed to roll with. And our DMs actually help new DMs just be flexible. Yeah. Okay, one last question.
Depends on what the group's looking for. A lot, the game that I'm playing and not GM, everybody has a hard out at 8. I'm the oldest person there by at least 10 years. So all of them have energy to go make plans after 8 p.m., whereas me, I'm like, I should have been getting ready for bed 20 minutes ago. And so it does depend on what they have planned. It's ideal to try to make time to hang out. With my weekly game that I host at my house, or bi-weekly game that I host at my house, we know that we're probably going to sit around and talk a little bit, and a lot of times that's when things will come up. So just be prepared to talk about things and be willing to ask the questions, like, especially if you're an introvert like me and non-confrontational. There's going to be some fear, but figure out a way to have those conversations, especially if you are planning to share the gospel with somebody who isn't a Christian. Be willing to take that risk, but for the most part, just be prepared to hang out afterwards. Clear your schedule as much as possible, especially if it's a ministry situation.
Yeah, I freaking suck at this. I'm way too freaking tired, just to be honest. Like, I'm just too tired. So, like, we wrap up at 11 p.m. and I'm like, my head hurts and I'm done. The truth is, some of the most important conversations that I've had growing up, though, were in the, like, literally on the street outside, waiting to get in our cars post D&D with my friends. Like, I've had some really important conversations there. Now, a lot of those important conversations for me with deep relationships come up in one of two places. My personal game, it's when I sit down and we jump on Discord and I say, "How you doing, man?" And we just see where it goes. And sometimes we don't play. Sometimes we talk theology for like 2.5 hours. In the church, it's at the end when I say, "Hey guys, had a lot of fun tonight. We're all back at the guild hall. Sorry we had to fast forward to the end of that because I never end on time. Hey, how can I pray for any of you? Is there a way that I can pray for you?" And where it happens is in my direct messages. Because almost always someone will raise a prayer concern and they'll be obscure about it because they're not comfortable yet, but they do want to tell me. They just didn't want to tell everybody. And so I'll get done and I'll go over and I'll plan on having a little bit of time to myself, knowing full well I'm going to be answering direct messages post-game. I usually have something from someone, whether it's a question about the game itself or a magic item they could buy, or they're like, "Hey, I know I said just pray for me because of my mental health, but I tried to kill myself this week." And it's like, okay, that's where real ministry is taking place. Like, it's going to be in DMs afterwards where people are going to be really honest with you. That's where the post is. We technically have 3 minutes left. If we have one more person who wants to ask something.
What's your character's backstory?
Her parents were tragically killed, okay?
That's my character's backstory.
Yeah, well, isn't it all of our characters' backstories? It's just the lazy person's way of saying, "I don't want my parents to ever come into game," right? Just kill them now. Yeah, I just want to be bitter and brooding, please. Truth be told, I'm an edgelord in games, and I'm pretty okay with just admitting to that. I'm a bit of an edgelord. Okay, thank you guys so much. Hey, just a reminder, go grab some dinner if you want, but in the 3 lodges, we're going to be playing games and hanging out tonight. Are you running something?
I ran 2 in a row. I am out of steam.
He's out of steam. But if you'd like to meet up and go hang out, talk D&D, or play some D&D, I'm sure there's some people who wouldn't mind getting together to play some
There's already
D&D.
people interested, so if Giles ain't gonna do it, somebody else has to.
Yeah, there's already people interested.
No pressure.
Were you brushing your teeth or saying I'll do it?
That's the end.
Oh, you okay? Yeah, so that'll be up at the top. If I have the energy to go up and run something tonight, I will. If not, I'm sure there'll be somebody there who'd be willing to throw something together. I'm sure. Well, thanks. In this hall, Gilded Greylands is downstairs. Stop by and say hi to them and see if there's something you want to pick up before you go to dinner. And then we'll be playing some board games and hanging out in this room tonight and in Gilded Greylands downstairs. At Oaks, the whole way down is, of course, the video game area. And so the LAN center is still set up down there?
Oh, absolutely.
It's still set up down there, so go and hang out with us there. This is the last formal piece of NCMS, and you spent it with us, so thank you so much for talking about my favorite thing other than Jesus with me for the last hour and 15 minutes. You guys are awesome. Done.